All right, good day, everybody. Welcome to the Deal Scout. Josh here. On today's show, we're going to talk about how to get grant money. Sedale, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Super excited to be here.
Yeah. All right, so we're hanging out at a bar or a coffee shop or whatever, and someone comes up and they go, "Hey, Sedale, awesome hair, awesome beard. Tell me a little bit about you." How do you respond?
Typically, I'll say I am a serial entrepreneur and I love helping people. One of my focuses in life is around economic empowerment. It's something that I've always been interested in, is getting people the resources they need to do the things they want to do. And in a very capitalist focused society, that for me is all about getting people access to capital. So that's usually how I lead off. If someone's like, "Who are you?" This is me.
Yeah. Now, you haven't always been in this. So I was reading about you. You kind of doing my, research. You actually spent some time in the water. Kind of give us an idea on your career journey to get to where you are.
Sure. Yeah. So when I started, I grew up around a lot of kind of career people. And when I say that, I think the generation before me, a lot of the like pre-millennial, because I fall like at the tail end, like the elder millennial group is probably me. But, before that, there's a lot of folks who have stayed in their jobs. My mom, she's been in her job for, years, like 30, 40, like a long time. And I remember seeing folks who were just like, "Oh, can't wait till I retire, this thing and that thing." And I was like, this seems awful. I want to 100% never do that. And so I made a decision when I was starting in school. It's like, I want to always work on things that I'm really passionate about. I want to do stuff that makes me excited. And, I've been very lucky and privileged to be able to pursue that. But I ended up dropping out of school. I was studying to be a lawyer. I dropped out and I became a river guide, and kind of, took what went from like one gap year to like 5 gap years, and just explored the world, and worked as a river guide. And was very lucky to be able to work in amazing places around the world. And as I was thinking and collaborating with some friends on a variety of things, I started really honing in on this idea of, getting people access to money seems to be a really, not only like a lucrative business, but like a really fun business, because you get to see people who like are working on wild things. Like I mean, earlier this year, I was super happy. I helped, a friend who is working on like flight suits. Our company was able to help another company that's working on like tugboats for outer space. Like, it's just like crazy, like really cool ideas. And these are the kind of things that, these people are building, and they're dreamers and visionaries, and they just need, money. And money at the end of the day is like a lot, it's just sort of like a function. It's not really what's driving all this really cool stuff forward, but it is a resource, and getting it is certainly a skill. And so as I've been able to like build things in my career, that's been a focus of mine, is like, how do we kind of like get these people who are doing really cool stuff the capital they need to like make it happen. And so that's been what I've been focused on, and been able to slowly build a team. Myself and my founding team, we've been together for working on companies for almost 10 years now, and slowly been able to like coalesce this team who have like these shared values and shared visions about the kind of impact, and disparate visions, but at least an agreement about like what all that is.
Yeah. All right. So here you are. You're going through law school, and you're going to be an attorney. What kind of attorney were you thinking about becoming?
I really like growing up. I really enjoyed like the idea, and so my uncle is in like family law. I have some friends who are like more like prosecutors, but I really did enjoy the idea of being like some kind of like criminal attorney. That was just like an idea that I had in my head. I was like, this could be really fun. It'd be really, really interesting, and you get to like hear all these crazy stories and do all this stuff. And but yeah, I mean, ultimately, I was like, this is too much reading, and I'm not having fun, and this doesn't like fit with my whole thing about doing stuff that I enjoy. So I'm out.
Yeah. All right. So the day before you quit, you dropped out to then become a river guide, right? Riding boats and doing cool things there. The day before you quit, you and I go back in time. Let's do some role play. You and I go back in time. We're sitting in the dorm. having a chat to see your younger self, and the next day you're about to quit. All these fears, all these things, all these thoughts are running into your head. What's mom going to say? What's family going to think? What people like? All these things, and you get to have a conversation with the guy the day before you quit legal. What would you say? What would the conversation look like?
Like me now talking to that guy.
Oh yeah, you
Yeah.
get to sit across your younger self, but he doesn't know that you're the future self though.
Oh man, I would have just been like, hey, you should really look into this startups thing. It's a good time. I think that's really what I was missing and looking for is I knew I wanted to like be very self-directed and set my own hours and set my own terms about like what I'm gonna do. I'm a very unemployable person. Like I have to work for myself. And I think that at that point in life, I didn't really know that existed. I grew up in a super rural community, like logging was the main industry where I grew up. My parents were super educated, so we moved from Davis in this college town up into the woods. And so I grew up around like academia and then a lot of sort of like blue collar folks. And so there wasn't like a lot of discussion about startups. There was a lot of kind of, like I said, a lot of career people. Who had maybe like moved away from the city to like enjoy more of life, even though they didn't like the part where they were like they'd literally divided their lives. That's how much they didn't like their jobs, is that they like moved into the woods to get away from their work. Like it was
Right.
it was kind of like a really grim thing. And I just did. I was like, don't know what this is, but it's awful. Let's find something else over here. And startups, it turns out startups was what I was looking for. I just didn't know it. And so if someone had like told me, at any point out of like high school that startups were a thing, I would have been all over it. And I just didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you make a really good point. When people have to move into the woods, buy the house away from the job because they have to escape the job, then that's exactly what that is for them. It's a job. Now, how do you look at? It seems like you look at career and work a little different than most. How do you view it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I've heard people say this over, it's a common phrase like work-life balance, right? And I don't believe in that. Like I think that in an ideal society, we would optimize for having like just a harmonious existence, which to me means working on something that you're passionate about, that you can like you become and embody the work that you're doing, and it's like it is you and it is part of you and it is like core to who you are. And I recognize like there's a lot of like privilege and really cool opportunity that I've been given to be able to do this, but at the same time part of my passion is hopefully to give that opportunity to a bunch of other people, and to make it more ubiquitous across the ecosystem, because I really do think that's what people should be doing. They shouldn't be like, and I think there's ways for people to participate in the economy doing the things they're passionate about. And I know people who, I know enough people who do it, and they're not building unicorns. They're like, they're fishermen, they're artisans, and they've just like, they've built their lives around what they're passionate about. And I think that's really the way to go.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So how did you go about quitting law school? Like, were you freaked out? What were your thoughts there? What did mom say? What did family say? What did your friends say?
Oh, I don't know that. I mean, I wasn't freaked out. I've always been. The story I always like to tell is there's this rapid on the Middle Fork where you go over this. It's called Ruckachucking. You go over this big waterfall. It's like 24, 25 feet. It's pretty significant, and it's a very intimidating rapid, because you have to, all your guests get out and they walk around, and you paddle over a small waterfall, and then you paddle over this massive waterfall into this pretty significant rapid, and you got to get through it all by yourself. And a lot of my friends would always be like, they're like, always kind of discussing how to go down it and like what things to do as you go over the edge to make sure you don't. And my approach was always just to sort of like hold on and like just go over and see what happens. And so that's, it's something that I've certainly been blessed with in life, is that I don't really have like I've never had like a lot of anxiety about things. So I figure, it's whatever's going to happen is going to happen. The outcomes are stuff that you just kind of deal with and move through. And it's nice. And I think you know, I think a lot of that comes. My parents were, and I've now as a parent myself, I'm ultimately just very confused about how they ever pull all this off. But they never like we never had a curfew. There was like not a lot of rules in our house, and I think the and I still talk to them, and I'm like, what does like how did this work? And they don't know. But the insight that I've gleaned so far is that they gave us so much freedom that we were able to like explore and experiment so much. But we also like somewhere in the back of our brains, we knew that like if we broke the ecosystem of like freedom and trust, that then it would end somehow, and it would end badly. And so we were,
Yeah.
we always. So I didn't hear, didn't hear anything about it except for like have fun and go enjoy your life, from them. So it was a pretty like I think people kind of expected it to at that point. Like, I was very much, someone who had talked a bit about like wanting to do my own thing and didn't really know where that's going. And as it turned to come to find out that like there's a lot of sort of like entrepreneurial drive within my family, and my uncles and aunts all run the family business, which they're, now that I think, as I've thought about it, and I've thought about it more and more, and of course now I, fully like they're entrepreneurs in their own right. It's more of, a Main Street business, so to speak, but they set out and did their own thing. And so it's something that I think people sort of expected, or they weren't surprised by it, at least.
Yeah. Now I'm on your LinkedIn, so I want you to say your full name for the audience listening in.
It's Sedale Turbovsky.
All right, talk to us about the meaning and the origin of that name.
Yeah, so the name Sedale actually comes from Afrikaans, the Dutch language. So my mom had some friends from South Africa, and my family hails from have like Irish and sort of Native American descendants, as well as Ukrainian, which is the Turbovsky, of course, from my dad's side of the family. And so there's always been, my family itself is very multicultural. They have like a very strong, kind of Latinx and Hispanic, portion of the family. There's Enriquez's, there's Nakai's, so Japanese. There's a lot of folks within my family. My mom is the youngest of 13 kids. They're like,
holy crap,
Irish Catholic farmers who like moved and like settled and built a big family farm and business in Northern California. So, it's a big family, big like farming family. And so lots of different and fun connections across that spectrum of individuals as people chose partners and grew and continued to. So it's really fun, and it's fun being part of a family like that. And so the name itself, like Sedale, comes from this Afrikaans word that means always faithful, and Turbovsky is just is like a pretty common Ukrainian surname, and I'm not 100% sure what it means exactly. That side of the family history is a bit fuzzier and harder to navigate. So yeah.
So 13 kids. One of 13 kids, so you've got a lot of uncles and aunts. Tons.
Oh yeah, we had just my family when my wife and I got married, which is pretty funny because she's an only child. My invite list to the wedding was 300 people, and that was just my family.
Yeah. So was your wife kind of freaked out, right? Because the expectation, sometimes mom-in-laws go, yeah, I came from a family of 13. How many kids are you guys going to have? Right?
We were on the same page about that one. So it wasn't too big of a deal. It was pretty funny though that, I met all of her family at one Thanksgiving, and it took her 3 years to meet all of my family.
Yeah. Yeah. So how many kids do you guys have now?
We have 2.
Okay. So 11 more, and then
yeah.
you
And then
caught
we'll be
up
right
with
on.
mom.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. So when you guys get together with family, what do the meals look like? What kind of food do you guys typically eat at a family meal?
Oh man, it really depends on the venue and the family group, right? So we have over at the ranch. There's two kind of families that like my cousins run the family business now, which is about this over 100 years old now, which is pretty cool. And my grandpa, who was Japanese, he was actually interned during the war, and they had a really good friend who like kept the farm for them and then gave it back to them when he got out. And so there's this farm that the family has in Newcastle called Twin Peaks Orchards, and you can go look it up. And they run everything over there. And so my aunt is an incredible caterer, and she cooks a lot of like Japanese food, but also just food in general. Amazing caterer, amazing chef. And then the family that's there also, so it depends. If we're there, it's a lot of just like really like fresh, interesting food, a lot of homemade stuff. And then we kind of tend to follow like whatever traditions are out there that are kind of classic. So, Thanksgiving's coming up. It'll be like a lot of like stuffed mushrooms and turkey and hams and like things like that. But I think probably mostly it's like everyone brings stuff, and so it's a pretty legit like, a pretty legit gathering of food, especially when you figure on like 60 or 70 or a couple hundred people showing up. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, depending on how big the gathering is. So we do like family reunions every few years, and yeah, it's a lot of folks to feed for sure. So it's always a wide variety of food too.
Yeah, I mean, your family gatherings sound so cool because multicultural. There's different color people. They talk different. They look different. They bring different food. Like it sounds like a really cool party.
It is. It is
Man,
a good time, and it's one of those things that I think has made my approach to just kind of life a little bit different as well. As there's a lot of different ideas, and so as the more and more I like struck out on my own and did my own things, I like learned more about like my uncles and other people within my family. So, I mean, it's hard to like keep up with all the stories with that many people. And so the more I got to know them, like my adult relationships with like my aunts and uncles are always are interesting. And like I've had like, one of my uncle Raul, who's from Mexico, he and I have like the really interesting chats in Spanish about all kinds of stuff. And so it's really cool. You pick up all kinds of different stories and get a lot of different perspectives on life and how to do things.
yeah. And I mean, you have a built-in marketing distribution list just within your family. If only your family listened to this episode would go
Right?
viral just for your family alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool
So
that way too.
yeah. All right. So here you are on a river. You're cresting 25-foot waterfalls, diving head foot. You're like, just whatever. Hang on. People are like, you're nuts. You're crazy. You have this awesome set of hair. Like, so for people just listening into the podcast, like this guy has like this fuzzy big hair. It's awesome. Like, do you ever find stuff in there like you like lost something and then it's like,
Oh
there you
man.
go, you found it?
Yeah, I mean,
'Cause
yeah, for sure. It's especially like, going hiking or walking. I mean, even there's like all kinds of trees around the office here, and I'll like walk back and I'm like, yeah, it happens. It comes with the territory for sure.
yeah. So how old are the kids?
3 and 1. So
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've got a 8, 4, and 1. What a wonderful thing. So how do you manage this? You're building a company, which is you've raised capital. You've done some really cool things. You've got an incredible amount of people. You've helped a lot of people. Like let's start with this. How do you manage a business, a founding team? You're an investor. You're a professional human, according to your LinkedIn. You've got a lot going on. What does life balance, right? Because you kind of said earlier, balance maybe doesn't exist or whatever. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
it really does, it really doesn't. So it's I think that statement and the fact that like you have kids and have a family life don't have to be like, it doesn't have to be different, right? So I mean, like one of the things that I love doing is going so my oldest, the 3-year-old, loves like riding bikes. And so what my wife and I have started doing is like on the weekends, we do like a switch off. So we'll go one-on-one with one of the kids so that they get like some single like focus time with each one of us. It's been really good. And my wife's an angel of a human being, and she like, we had a discussion when we just gotten married, and talked about having kids, and talked about if she wanted to stay in her career or wanted to take care of the kids, and that was that's what she wanted to do. So she's like lead parent for sure. Like she's putting in the time during the week when I'm at work, and we try to like switch off and definitely make time for each other to have our own like personal time away from the kids, but also like make sure the kids are engaged and having a good time. But I talked to especially Gideon, the oldest. I talked to him about stuff that I'm working on. He'll like come, how they do. He'll like come wake up at 4 a.m. when I'm working on something. Like, all right, well, you can help me build pro forma, or you can like, you can read a book. Like those are the options, or go back to bed, preferably. But sometimes you just sit and like, I talk to him about what I'm working on and things, and I anticipate, I'd love to continue to do that. I tell my wife all the time that I want to like, if the kids don't want to do chores, they better like decide they want to like hustle on the internet and like create some kind of online business with some no-code tools. So I fully support like wrapping that world around them if they want it, if they like it and it's something they're passionate about, then I'm happy to support that over time. And I tell her that all the time. I'm like, look, if they go to college and like get a degree, I might be a little disappointed. Like I might be kind of sad. And like it's not the same, I don't have the same dreams for them that maybe classically have existed, or maybe that other people might have for their kids. I was like, if they decide to get into startups, I think that'd be cool. But maybe they'll become artists, who knows. But yeah, you do have to coordinate. Like people laugh sometimes, but my wife and I have like a shared Google Calendar, and we book, like we definitely schedule, like we have to schedule life, right? And that works between work and board meetings. And I sit on the board of and advise some like nonprofits and some other groups. And so I try to block Saturday and Sunday as like my kind of like deep work, but for family days. And so far pretty successful at that. But in between, it's it's a lot, and it's just chaotic, and you gotta put in the work to make it work.
Yeah, that's so cool. You now, man, I know that there's this show called the Deal Scout, but as a scout, I'm a scout. I'm the Deal Scout, and being this, I find that what my job is to get to know people. Right? People do business with people they know, like, and trust. So my job as a Deal Scout is not necessarily looking for deals, right? Because that's what everybody's thinking, right? Hey, find me a deal, find me a deal. What I'm trying to find is a person, right? And then once I know the person, the deals come. On your LinkedIn, so I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, you say professional human being. I've never seen that title before. Now, I've got 40 years experience being a human being, but I wouldn't consider myself a professional. What does it mean to be a professional human being?
I think of this as sort of the confluence of kind of almost like a humanist perspective on life, to quote to put it in some kind of box, but also just like, at least for me, I've always found like above and beyond any kind of like religious beliefs, which I have and hold, but like there's a more of like I think to people maybe ideologically it's less threatening than other thoughts, where it like immediately takes them to weird places. And so I like the like concept of being a professional human being, in the sense that I think that people who don't have any kind of like sort of moral or like kind of ethical code are weird and a little strange, and like people I don't necessarily want to work with. And so I couch like the professional human being terms, and like, hey, I am gonna do my best to like be a good person. And I feel like that's something that like anyone can get on board with, and doesn't take people's mind to wild places. And so I always I push this idea for a couple reasons. One, because I think there's a lot to be said with like people's kind of personal approach to like how they view morality and other things. But there's like a core set of things that everyone can get on board with, and that's like being like a good human. Like generally speaking, as you travel and work with people around the world, and I've had the the really cool opportunity to do that, regardless of where I am, there's kind of like a general idea of like, don't be a jerk and like be a good person. And so like the professional human being I've always like put out there because I want to be like, I want to approach being like a human the same way that like I approach being an expert as a funding consultant and a CEO. Like there should be some level of like organization and professionalism to how I approach humanity in just my day to day. And so that's like how that kind of term evolved, was like, we aspire to be CEOs, we aspire to be, we should also aspire to be professional, like at being human people to each other.
You have a really cool personality.
Thank
You're very I don't want to say glowing, because that, like that, you'd be like, come on, man, you could have thought like of a cooler, tougher way to describe you. But man, you got a magnetic personality. I don't know if people tell you that, but you're cool.
Thank you.
All
I
right, back
appreciate
to
that.
deals. Yeah, man. All right, enough of that. Your heads are deals. All right. So you're on the river, and it's time. You're like, all right, my time on the river is coming to an end. It's time to do something else. Looking at your LinkedIn, we dove into some investments. You built some companies. You sat on the board. You've done a lot of stuff. What did that look like? How do you go from river to being where you're at today?
Yeah, I actually remember this day super clearly because it was an interesting and kind of like a weird day for me. But there's this rapid on the Mendoza River called La Suegra, which is the mother-in-law. And it's a pretty hardcore. It's just a really big wave. Really, that's all it is. It's not that complicated, but it's a big wave and it hits you really hard. And I remember like I was like, on the back of the boat, just like, the front of the boat had like punched through the wave and like coming over the back. And I was like looking out off to the side of the river where these guys were loading up this truck with sand. They were like, there's this big truck out there. There's a lot of like brick making and other things going on in Argentina, and they use sand a lot for cement and everything else, as you I'm sure you know. And so they're like loading up this truck with sand. And from then on, I was like, why are they using shovels? And I was like floating back to the rafting base. I was like still thinking about this. And so I talked to one of the owners there, and I was like, why are like the dudes who why are they like the people who are out there collecting sand? Like, why aren't they using like a truck or whatever? And he was telling me that like, as the employers in the town were like trying to employ more people, they like were like, hey, if we get a backhoe or like a tractor, we only get to employ one guy, but if we like just don't buy that thing, then we can like employ 10 dudes and just pay them not very much to like load this thing with sand. And I was like, that seems weird and backwards. And so I started to think more about just impact. And I was like, all right, I've got like some skills around this stuff. I've been able to do some work in like optimizing outcomes for businesses and helping them streamline access to capital and streamline their operations. And I have all these like digital skills. So I'd been like building websites on the side and doing all this stuff. And so I was like, I probably should do something else with my life that like has some more impact, just because like, this isn't a problem that I have to worry about necessarily, but it's something that I could do to be helpful. And I feel like it'd be more fulfilling than just like, I had been rafting for long enough. I was like, going downstream and around the rocks is pretty fun. And like all the parties are really fun, but like I was just kind of like unfulfilled. And so that's when I started. So I started doing talked my way into some consulting gigs, talked my way into some bigger consulting gigs, built a consultancy called Guerrilla Digital, scaled that up, found my other two current co-founders along the way, ended up getting invited back to the United States to run a startup, which is one of my first startups, carbonBLU. And things just kind of spiraled from there. But along the way, one of the big important things that got us to where we are now, for myself and the other our co-founders, is when we started Guerrilla Digital, we wrote down like this list of like work, like the rules for good work, because at that point we had like consulted for people like Deloitte and McKinsey. We'd like subcontracted for all these different groups, and once again like run up against this like very like what we thought was like a super gross way to like approach work, which was like you have to be here. And like I remember working for this company in Europe and like taking a call on the beach in Chile, and like everyone else is in this boardroom, and I was like, well, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we're at a meeting. And I was like, I mean, I'm here too, but I'm at a beach. Like, why are you in that room? And no one really had a good answer. And so I always, I love telling people that like we were doing remote work way before it was like, way before the pandemic happened. And yeah, we wrote down these rules for work and really set like a roadmap of like the impacts and things we wanted to create. And even though they're kind of diverse, like our CTO is like off in the woods building a cabin and harvesting lumber on his like homestead that he's building. And I really would like to be back in like San Mateo, closer to like, restaurants and stuff, and like not as far out in the woods as I am. And, and our other co-founder lives in like in northern Nevada in the desert. Looks like the Valley of Rohan from Lord of the Rings out there. And so there's definitely like a lot of different opinions about where personally we want to take our lives. But we built our businesses around just like those outcomes that we wanted to generate for one another. And so that's been key to like getting here, was deciding really early on like how we wanted to work together and what success looked like for everyone, and then just kind of coordinating around those incentives. And so we've been very lucky, to be able to get the contracts and work and opportunities that we've had. But a lot of it has come from and stemmed from wanting to like, we took a month off and rafted the Grand Canyon together one time. Like being able to do stuff like that was the whole point. And that's what we wanted to enable. And kind of going back to your earlier, like, what does it mean to like have no work-life balance? That's what it is. It's like our identity is wrapped into and like tied to what we do. And it's a really nice way to live, because we're not at conflict with anything within like that professional space.
Yeah. Super interesting. You and I should probably have a conversation one day, maybe on one of my other shows called Uncensored Advice for Men, because you talked about identity being wrapped up in work and such like that, but it becomes like, instead of a balance, it just becomes a part of the living. That'd be an interesting topic. So remind me about that. That's something that you and I should, maybe explore later on. But back to deals on this. So you were rafting, building some websites to kind of support your job and your hobby, right? Doing this stuff, and you're doing some cool stuff in digital. You found yourself pretty good at it. People begged you to come back. You wound up doing consulting gigs. You wound up being a part of a startup. You did consulting for McKinsey, and like you quickly became a legitimate business, right? Give me an idea for how I don't know if you're still part of it, but give me an idea to the size of scale, employees or revenue, or give me an idea of how successful, that kind of stuff became, if you're able to.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, at like Guerrilla Digital, which is our like consultancy that we built, it still exists. We spun it off and sold it to a company called Reverent. When we walked away, they had a few $1 million in contracts. They're doing really well, producing videos, documentaries, and they're still in business today, rocking it, and working with some huge brands, companies like Energia and Momentum and other groups like that. So we had all kinds of clients, everything from like state governments and the UC system to smaller businesses. And it's actually really funny. We started Guerrilla Digital. We were like slinging like $500 websites to small businesses on like Main Street. And we quickly realized that like no one could pay us on time and no one had any budget. We were never gonna make enough money doing that. And so we moved away from that model pretty fast. But we started working for bigger and bigger brands. And we're very lucky to like leverage our network and such to get there. And then carbonBLU was really fun. So that was a cool startup. We built a SaaS platform that lived on top of telematics data and helped big fleets deploy alternative fuels and advanced vehicle tech. And we ended up selling that back to the engineering firm, one of the strategic partners that had backed it early on. And I mean, that was used by people like Caltrans, the university, FedEx, UPS, all kinds of really cool companies we ended up getting to work with. So we had a lot of luck, a lot of success, and a lot of it came from like I'd say if I have any superpower, it is being able to pull together like really cool teams. Like at carbonBLU, we were able to bring on this guy named Rick Sykes, who was legitimately like people like UPS, like he had just come out of this big feat job at the city of Santa Monica. People like UPS and others were like trying to hire him, and they were like offering him all kinds of money. And I got him to come to work at carbonBLU for no money. I was like, hey, we'll just give you equity, but we're working on something really cool and it's super fun. And he was like, yeah, why not? Let's do it. So I tell that story frequently just to illustrate that, like, if you can get people like stoked about working about something they're passionate on, that it can often trump like a lot of other things. And, you know, obviously eventually you got to like pay people or what have you, because people need to eat. But like, there's really something there when you like can find like people's passions and like tap into what they're really excited about. And it can keep people, I think the two things that's really cool is it can keep people from making mistakes in their careers, but it also like puts together the winning team, right? Like if you just have someone who just is like, you know, writing code to write code, well, that's great because they're probably going to write code for you, and that's cool. But like when you have someone who really cares, they're not just going to write code. They're thinking through how to like be better and faster and solve problems more efficiently. And so it's like that's the differentiator in all the teams I've ever built. It's like find people who are passionate and stoked and like really excited about it, because those are people who are going to like stay up with you till like, you know, 2 a.m. and fix stuff. They're going to like come through with really interesting, innovative solutions. And that's what I've been, you know, really blessed to be able to do, is like run teams that are really stoked. I think that's key.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That is so cool about how to attract rock star teams. Now, before we dive into more deals, I got another question, right? So you were on the river, spent 9 years on the river on a boat with some oars and jumping some rapids and such like that. I guess 2 questions. What was the name of the mother-in-law that was like the 25-foot wave or whatever that was, the mother-in-law wave? What was it called?
So there's 2 ones. There's the big 25-foot waterfall is called Rucachucky. And then the La Suegra is Spanish for mother-in-law. And La Suegra was also the name of a rapid.
La Suegra. La
Yeah.
Suegra. That was probably terrible. All right. What was your nickname on the river? I'm sure you guys had nicknames. What was yours?
Yeah, so especially in South America. So in the United States, my nickname was Sideshow Bob because of my hair. But in South America, my nickname was Pantene because my name is actually close to a brand of shampoo in Argentina. It's spelled pretty much exactly the same way. And so they called me Pantene, which is, you know, another brand of shampoo.
Pantene Pro V or whatever that is,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I got it. All right. That's awesome, man. I might call you that. Like when I put you in my phone, it's going to be shampoo or Pantene. All right. So back to deals. All right. So you had an exit. You've had, actually you've had a few exits. You built some cool teams. Now, right now, you're building a company called OpenGrants, and people could find it at OpenGrants.io, and you're helping people get grant money, right? Like, what inspired you to build that? What inspired you to build that? I should just ask that.
Yeah. So I guess, back to the economic empowerment thing, grant money has played, and I don't know that people realize this. So in the United States, and I think around the world now, you get fed a lot of what people sometimes refer to as like the startup porn or whatever. It's like, hey, this is, you go out and you raise VC money and you change the world and you become Facebook or whatever. And the truth, or like the reality of it, is that VC money plays a really important role, of course, in scaling and growing these big unicorn kind of companies. But the source of capital for more than 2/3 of just like the most transformational innovations over the last 3 decades has come from grant funding. So grant funds, and in particular like research and development R&D money from government, that's what's behind the internet, the cell phone, like everything that's making this conversation possible right now is federal R&D money. And the reason for that is that grant funding as a capital source has a really unique profile. It absorbs a ton of risk. Like it'll touch ideas way before VC or bank or anyone else will touch them. And it's the most patient money because it requires no repayment and it's non-dilutive. So you're not on the hook for anything other than, whatever deliverables you've agreed to do with that grant funding. And so grant money is not only ideal for experimentation in economic development and experimentation in sciences, but it's also ideal for, supporting social and like impact driven causes like housing the homeless and feeding people and all these other things that we want to see accomplished in the world. And one of the things that I think is really frustrating to me is that, the federal government deployed $750 billion in grant funds in 2019, and 30% of that money just like whoosh, just like burnt away. Didn't like achieve any kind of impact for a variety of reasons. And so grant funding is incredibly archaic. It's very slow. It's hard to access. There's a lot of reasons that people don't use it more often and access it more often. And so our vision and our mission with OpenGrants is to empower people to access grant funding for the world's most important work. Like, if we're going to cure cancer, solve climate change, feed the world, like there's a lot of problems that are in front of humanity, and people don't like to really like think about it too much because they get depressed, and that makes sense. And one of the things that we need, and this is back to that, my original kind of motivation. One of the things that we need to be able to do, and that everyone agrees on this, is like we need to be able to deploy capital really quickly now, because the longer we take to solve these challenges, the more money it's going to cost, until we reach a point where the challenges are so difficult that no amount of money in the world will solve the problem, because there's just not time or technology to get it done. And if we keep deploying grant funding at the rate that we do now, we're never going to solve anything. We won't get anything done. And so there's there's all these issues facing the world. And guess what? There's all these smart people across the world who have really great ideas. And the problem is, because of how VC and other money is concentrated, the hubs of economic activity around the world are really concentrated in these tiny spots. And there's a lot of people who are just overlooked. And so our missions with OpenGrants is to make grant funding transparent, equitable, and accessible. And what that really means is giving everyone an opportunity to like get those ideas out there and get access to this capital and be considered as part of this ecosystem. And the only way that we saw to do that was to build a better framework for deploying grant funding and build better infrastructure. And so that's why we put OpenGrants together.
So when you built this business, right? You chatted with your friends. You just had an exit event, right? You had a baby somewhere in the same time frame. Baby number one was probably in that time frame, right? And then then you guys started building this together. Like, how did you approach and make another baby? There's not. Yeah. Listen, I have 3 kiddos. Each kid that came along, I had a financial catastrophe after each one of them. That's why I'm done having kids. It's time to make back all the money I lost with those things. I'm done. But side note, moving forward though, with this, how did you guys go about building it, right? Like, you've raised some money to do this. Kind of like walk us through the process of, because your mission is to make money accessible, but you guys had to actually raise money to do some of this. Like, talk to us about that. How did that happen? What went through your head there?
Yeah, totally. What we did is we built I built out like a model of how the platform would work in Figma, and then just like went around to all of these agencies and other people who deployed capital, and I would show it to them. I'd be like, hey, this is this thing we're going to build. What do you think about it? I did so many customer interviews and customer discovery before we incorporated, actually. So most of like 2018, I was working actually at the firm that had one of the firms that had backed carbonBLU, a company called Momentum. And they do a ton of grant funding, and I'd contracted with them. I'd actually helped lead their rebrand from Grant Farm to Momentum. And so I'm working at this firm that does a lot of grant writing and consulting and such. And I pitched it to the CEO, who's also a mentor and a friend. And he was like, hey, I don't know, maybe. And then I just went about my work, and I was doing lots of customer interviews. And ultimately, I realized that I was not going to be able to spin it up within that org at Momentum, because there's just too much. There's too many things in the way. Like they're not like an agile VC. They're a really great management consultancy. They're very smart and brilliant people, they don't have the mechanisms to like do that necessarily. And so I ended up telling them, hey, look, I'm working on this project. This is where it's going. And they weren't super excited at first. And they became investors eventually, so that was nice. But yeah, a lot of customer discovery. That was the first thing. I just talked to people who deployed grants, talked to people who wanted to like get grant funding, showed them the thing. I'd be like, hey, look, I'd show them the model and how it all worked. And they were excited about it. They were like, okay, this is kind of cool. It's all right. And so I started like building more conviction around the idea and streamlining things. I pulled the team together. I was like, hey, we're going to do this thing. So in like late 2018, we incorporated the company, and we raised our first kind of like friends and family sort of angel round from some folks who invested in carbonBLU previously. And it was great. So we started down that path of iteration. We built our first, like, it wasn't even an MVP. It was like a really awful demo. And it was called Egeria also. It was like a terrible name, terrible everything. And so once we figured out like some of the things though, and we actually made like our first, few $1,000s from users, who, I mean, bless our early users. I have no idea. Like there's people who are on the platform now who started with us, and I do not like, it's just a testament to like the need for grant funding and nothing else, because I don't know how they suffered through those, like that early ugly beta. But anyways, we were very lucky. We ended up pitching Boost VC, and they kind of rejected us actually first. They passed. They're like, nah. And then I got a call back from Adam Draper one day, and he's like, hey, how come we didn't invest in your company? I was like, I don't know. It's your fund. And so we went down and met. And he's like, all right, I get it. I think this is awesome. Let's do this. And so that was our first like check, and that happened in so from 2018, late 2018, where we incorporated. There's like a year of kind of work, and we burnt through, of course, the first like 100K that we raised. And then we raised a proper pre-seed round and from Boost VC, went through their accelerator. But yeah, it was a lot of talking to people. I must have done 200, 300 interviews with customers before we started really building stuff.
So cool that you spent so much time spending time with customers before building. I think a lot of visionaries, a lot of business, a lot of entrepreneurs, they kick off and they just build something that they think, right, that they have a need or whatever, and they build something for them. And I think that's cool. I think that's great. But talking to customers and building something that you think is good, also that the customer think is good, even better, right? Because they're going to be the ones stroking the check. Now, we were introduced through one of our allies, Gary, who helps companies raise capital through cafes and such like that. Now, that was an early vehicle of fundraising that you guys were kind of one of the first, I think. You guys were super early using that.
We were the fourth in the whole world for sure.
Yeah. So the fourth company to use, could explain to me, what that is, right? So people listening, because what I want people to hear on the other side of this interview is different ways people build businesses, the good, the bad, the ugly, and then advice that we could learn together as deal makers. So maybe they don't have, they could go faster, and we could build cooler stuff that solves more problems. So kind of give us your experience being the fourth person in the world to use a cafe to fund your business.
Yeah, so the cafe is a continuous agreement for future equity. It's a rolling roll up vehicle. So it takes up that one spot on your cap table. You allocate a certain amount of equity. In our case, we allocated 11.1% to it. And then based on basically based on the actual cost of the tokenized security that you're selling and the amount of equity you've allocated, there's an initialization phase where you basically raise that value of capital. And at that point, it kicks off a bonding curve that's linear, and the price of the tokens go up as more money is invested. Raising with the cafe was this very intentional effort on our part to once again lean into that narrative and part of our belief about creating equitable experiences. And this is also like part and parcel of what we're building. We see as the future of grant funding is going to be, in our minds, a public good that we hope that society and like the world can buy into and benefit from. And so these tokens represent the opportunity to participate in the upside of that opportunity without having to have a ton of deployable capital. And so right now it is like a Reg D, so you do have to be accredited. But the vision ultimately is to open that up to even more folks. And I'm happy to talk. That's a longer discussion around like the SEC rules around tokenized securities and all those things. But the idea and the vision here is that there's a couple kind of key tenets, and one is I personally believe very strongly that the next unicorn companies are going to be companies that are revolutionizing the citizen experience with government and GovTech. And I think that to the extent that we build a utility that the government will literally run services on, that the people should own part of that. And then that should be a way for them to have access to the very infrastructure of government in a very like liquid and option-based way. I was talking to somebody on Twitter the other day about this, and I don't think they really understood my point, and I don't think I understood their point maybe, and so that's not really important. But the point I brought up was like, look, if you pay taxes, yeah, that's a cool way to like get really nice subsidized services from the government. But if you have like optionality in ownership of like a utility, and the utility is something that you benefit from, not only do you have that like ownership of the utility where you want to like have other people participate and be part of that community, and you kind of like start to curate and support, and you like feel ownership and pride, and ideally you're not like actively trying to bring them down. But also if one day you decide you want to follow and like build something that you're passionate about, like I've been able to, you could go get, you can sell some of your ownership in that utility. And that's the cool thing about the cafe, is that unlike a safe note, your capital is only locked up for a year. At that point, you can trade or sell those tokens. And it's a really exciting innovation on the kind of like the traditional fundraise as well, because the portal itself is fairly automated. So anyone who is accredited or not can sign up, and then they have to do their own attestation, upload evidence that they are accredited. Then they get, they get the opportunity to invest. So it's a really like, it flips the whole model on its head in terms of, you tell me you're accredited. I'm not going to like go around looking for accredited investors. You come to me and invest. And it's a great model too, because it does really like, as a founder, I'm not having to worry about dilution. It's capped at a certain amount. So I don't have to worry about, getting overly diluted from investment into this vehicle. So it's a really cool model for sure.
And so philosophically, you like the approach to it because it makes it it creates its own marketplace, and then you could have your own, you can have an exit event, or you can, if someone needs the money, they can have a sell off later on. So it's a really great way to create a continuous relationship with people that go. So I love the way though, like you approach this systematically. We need a fundraising vehicle that fits our philosophy on how we do business.
Yeah.
That in itself is cool, because you weren't just chasing money. You chose a way that backed your fundamental beliefs.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think, it's it's always fun because like we've definitely run against investors who are like, this is terrible. We've had other investors be like, yeah, if we invest, we're going to undo this thing. And it's also, I wrote about this a while ago. It's like, it's a signal for us. Like people who are really excited about it, interested in it, those are the kind of people we want involved with our business. And a lot of, once again, this goes back to like the idea, like I want people to work on things they're stoked on. And that goes for investors too. Like, I don't want your money if you don't love what we're doing. Like that sounds like a terrible partnership. But if you're really excited about OpenGrants and the vision that we have and what we're building, then yeah, like why don't you invest and become someone who's involved with the company and can be an advocate, and we'd love to hear your ideas. And so it certainly had its challenges. I've definitely seen, and we've had to, do additional capital raises in other vehicles. But at the end of the day, like we just a little bit ago, we finalized with legal so that all of the consultants on our platform, even though they're not accredited, can receive grant tokens, equity in the company through the cafe. In return, like they can get compensation from their clients on the platform, and they can take some in equity. And so all of a sudden we have this ecosystem of people who they're generating money for us and they're generating money for themselves, but they're also generating value, like they're also building value and equity in the company itself, so that at an exit, instead of like, Uber and Lyft are great examples. They got into this big spat with all their drivers because they weren't getting paid enough, right? Like the drivers weren't getting compensated fairly and there was a problem. If they just use something like this, the issue goes away, right? Like it's all about aligning incentives and creating opportunity for people. And in the long run, we see this as the way to do that. And so we're very excited to be able to offer things like equity in the company to the actual consultants who are in our marketplace.
Awesome, man. So I cannot believe how fast this interview actually went. We got to talk about the business that you're building, right? So, well, we had a good conversation, but you got to give us an idea. What does it look like? So, you did explain, the different benefits of grants, right? Like I love it. It's patient money. No, the payback is sometimes none, non-dilutive. It is a way to fund, risk mitigated stuff that VC won't touch or that angel won't touch, maybe too early on. So maybe R&D. So like these are really good use cases for it. So let's just say I'm looking for, to build out an idea. I have no friends and family with money, right? And I'm looking at some options, and I come to OpenGrants.io. Yeah, what would my experience look like? Let's just say I'm raising. I need $500,000, or I need $100,000, or I need $10,000. Like, how do I approach this?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing you do, you can create a profile for free on the platform, and then you can jump into two processes. One is you can go and search for grant funding. So, a great example, I'll say a great example for small businesses right now in California in particular, because it's on top of mind for me, is that right now you can get money to put electric vehicle charging in front of your storefront in California. So if you're a small business, you might like go and type in like EV charging grants, and you want to like, attract those people with the Teslas and all the people with electric vehicles, so they'll plug in and charge in front of your store. Ultimately, that means they're going to have to wait there for like 20 minutes to a half hour, and ideally they come inside, and that drives some foot traffic and whatnot. So you're looking for grants, you go on the platform, you find a few of these, and then you say, hey, this seems like a lot of work, or I really don't, like, I see that the money's available, but I don't know what to do to get it. And then that's a really cool thing about our platform, is not only do we have the grant funding, but we also have the people. And these are expert consultants with backgrounds similar to mine, where they've like done a lot of deep work with government and with public-private partnerships and grant funding. And so you can search the same terms that you search for grants, you can search those in our marketplace of experts and find people who not only know grant funding in general, which is fine, but you want to find people who know that grant program itself. So if you search for like EV charging grants in our marketplace, you find someone who knows that program. And this is how we optimize outcomes, because like at the firm I worked at Momentum, they had like a 99.9% success rate applying for funding. Incredible. Typically people are somewhere at 11 to 33%. And one of the reasons they were so successful is, there's two reasons. One is they knew enough to not take projects that weren't going to succeed. And that is like a very undervalued skill in this space. And it's also something that you need to curate for, because some people, I get it. Like if you're a consultant and you just need money, you're going to say yes to all the projects, right? And that's unfortunate, because you're going to take projects that are going to lose and you're going to get paid anyways. And so the thing that we curate for are people who have these deep abilities, but also that they know enough to say no to projects, and they can steer you in the right way. And so that's one of the cool benefits of our platform, is you can just go without paying any money. You can have access to these experts, ask them some questions. And if they say, hey, your project seems like a really good fit, we should do it, then you know that there's some confidence, and they can kind of tell you what your chances are. If they say no, that's even better, because then you're not going to waste your time, and you're going to find something else that's a better fit, and they can help you find it. And so that's the other process that you can jump into, is instead of going find a grant, find someone to get a grant, what you can do, and I actually suggest this for all like small businesses and other groups, is you can go into our platform and you can talk to the experts, like, figure out what you're working on, search those keywords, and talk to one of the experts who comes up. and they can put together a whole strategy for you. And it only takes a few weeks of time, and it's not very expensive. And they can look at like a year's worth of grant funding and put together like 5 or 6 that they know you're going to be really competitive for. And they can like figure out who can help you write those. And that is really the thing we unlock for people, is like there's a whole cottage industry of experts who know this stuff off the top of their heads. They've spent so long doing it that they just know it. And these are the kind of people that need to get connected to small businesses and startups and local governments, because they're all really underserved in this area. And it's like we take grant funding from being this mysterious kind of awful imposing process, and our ethos has been to like, let's inject joy and hope into this process. Like, let's make it fun. Like our vision one day is to be kind of like Zillow, right? Like, people just like go hang out on Zillow, look at houses. I would love it if people just hung out on OpenGrants and like looked at money and were like, ooh, maybe I could build this project finally, maybe I could do this thing. We want it to be that same kind of like joyful, hopeful, engaging process. And that's the vision. I don't think we're all the way there yet. I know we're not. But that's the end result. And that's where we want to go.
So that is so cool. So you could kind of come in, play, be a lone wolf, do your own thing, search for grants, apply for grants, go through that process. Or you could say, hey, I need some help. And you could work with a grant writer who kind of walks you through the process, creates a strategy with you, maybe opens up some things. You have a plan, maybe help you fill out the forms. So you could kind of choose your own path. But just like while you were describing that, I just wanted to test this out. I went and I filled out the registration for it. I didn't fill out the DUNS number and some of that other stuff, but I was able to jump into the program and search for grants in Florida right off the bat while you were describing that. 104 grants in Florida right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if they all, I don't apply for a forest grant, but real quick, I was able to do that. And that's
awesome.
Just money sitting there waiting for someone to go, hey, I could use some help.
Yeah.
So let's do this, man. We've got to wrap up this interview because we just might have to do others in the future. For people looking to learn more about you, maybe do a deal with you, maybe get some grant support, or maybe see if that's even good for their for-profit, nonprofit, their mission-driven thing, or an idea. Where can people go connect with you and maybe do a deal with you?
Yeah, I mean, the best place to go is go to OpenGrants, just like it's spelled, opengrants.io, create a profile and get into it. We are a really agile early startup. So as you start talking to support, you're like literally only one person away from me. So if you have questions, just ping us, let us know that you heard about us on the Deal Scout podcast, and we can get in touch. Also, you can like search for S Turbovsky on Twitter. If you search my name, it's a very unique, like there's a lot of Sedales in the world, and there's a good amount of Turbovskys. There are not a lot of Sedale Turbovskys. It's a very unique name. So if you search for me on LinkedIn, the chances are you'll identify me by my hair. I think there's only one of me, pretty sure. So you can find me pretty easily on the internet. Happy to connect. But opengrants.io is the place to go. It's free. Sign up, look for funding, and our whole thing is let's connect you to really cool money so you can do the really important work that you're working on. And we want to hear all the cool ideas.
Sounds good. All right, fellow deal makers listening in, right? If you're looking, and you want to explore options for other types of money that are non-dilutive, non-payback, patient, and pretty much like on the table, ready for you to take a look at, reach out to our group over here. Go to opengrants.io, take a look at what they're doing, reach out to our guests, say thank you for being on the show, and find a way to do a deal with them. If you're working on a deal and want to chat about it on this show, head on over to thedealscout.com and fill out a quick form, maybe get you on the show next. Till then, we'll talk to you on the next episode and on the next deal. See you guys.